You're listening to the AI Moment with me, Jonathan Wagstaffe.
Me, Danny Denhardt.
And Dan, what are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to dive into will companies be building their own versions of LLMs? So will we be stepping away from Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, etc., and will companies go off and build their own specialist versions? So what do you think, Jonathan? Do you think people are going to do that, or do you think there's a different sort of journey forward?
Just to drill in on the difference. So obviously, lots of people listening to us will have used LLMs, ChatGPT, Claude, or Gemini, or any other things like Perplexity. And those models, as we probably all know, they've been trained over time on lots and lots and lots of public data. So, you know, it's read lots of books, it's read lots of websites, it's got lots of public information, and that's how it's built its knowledge base. And what we're talking here is more a custom model. So you kind of build your own LLM and you train it on your data. So you train it on, if you're a business, you train it on all of your operating procedures, product information. So basically the model now has a load of stuff around you as opposed to a load of publicly available stuff. And so you've got tools out there like Mistral Forge, and to an extent, which is a proprietary one of these. You've got things like Yahoo Scout, which is based on Claude. And these are the tools people are starting to look at to build this kind of solution. And for me, the key argument, Dan, is as we've started to talk about a lot, actually, when we're asked about which LLM should I use, we say, well, you know, pick your favorite, because actually they're all much of a muchness. And the key issue is context. So far more important than which model you use is what information do you give it to allow it to give you great answers. And so for me, we're in the same space here. And build your own LLM if you want, but the key issue is all that information you're going to give to it to allow it to have the context to give you great answers. And so the question then is, are you happy with that being on a public LLM, or do you really want it to be a private network? That's pretty much where I start with this thing, is like, what's important to you in that respect? What do you think, though?
Yep, I would agree. What many of the companies are doing at the moment is they're using LLMs as their base. So they're building into and with LLMs. So into Claude Haiku, for instance, like your example with Yahoo Scout. And then they're building RAG, which is a layer on top. And what they're then doing is helping to guide it with their own internal data or insights and intelligence to get a better or more accurate answer, review, etc. So the way I'm posing it to people is, remember, I think there is the rent model, the buy model, and then there's the build model for a lot of businesses. So if it's a buy, do you just go out and are you happy with just using Claude or ChatGPT or Copilot, for instance, for what you're doing and what you're connecting with? Or is it actually you want to then build your own version? So take all the inner workings of it, use it as a really core foundation, and then build in your own intelligence, your own data, your own nuance that no one else knows, and then put that into your product features, build it into your website, build it into your own chat, potentially build it into what you're trying to achieve it at. And is it actually more a case of, can you do that, or do you go out and try and build from scratch? And the issue with that is you're not going to get enough information to do that. So what most businesses will want to do is build on top of and build into these models like Yahoo have done and what a lot of them are doing. And I think this is where some LLMs are pushing their customers to go into, is we can give you a great foundation, but what we can't do is, unless you give us all your information, we can't do enough to make you as good and as powerful and as useful as you want to be. So that's kind of how I'm tackling it and how I'm talking it through with people at the moment. The one thing I would say is, if you want to dive in and you want to do it, it's going to cost you A, a lot of money, but B, also a lot of tokens, and token usage are exploding. So how do you keep that? How do you keep that under wraps, and how are you going to own it as a business owner and operator? And if you're leading product teams, is how you're going to leverage it and build the really powerful features. Because what a lot of companies don't have is that that AI intelligence inside. I don't have that model, the hub of people who have the experience to really build out on that. There are a couple of things that I would push people towards and say you really have to think these sort of levels through to make sure whether it's worth it or not.
Yeah, and I think that you're absolutely right. Yahoo Scout is a great example. I think that the likely winning model is some kind of hybrid, and Yahoo Scout is a great example of that, because it's not you're building a giant foundation from scratch. It's actually they've already got a strong base. They're linked in with Claude. It's got its own data and product ecosystem and everything, and then you build in your data on top of that. And I think that build your own LLM sounds like a great idea, but actually, as you say, there's a lot of token use there. There's a lot of complexity. You might not get to a really great answer at the end of that. So I suspect that hybrid model is going to be, well, for most businesses, building on the public models is going to be fine with the right security on them. For some businesses, building a hybrid would be the right answer. But the other thing, Dan, again, to get down to the dull, boring stuff is I think data quality is going to be a bigger issue for a lot of businesses than any AI ambition. It's kind of, that's all great. You build your own or you use a public one, but the dull old stuff like understanding what you're trying to do and the quality of your data, so much data we're still seeing is messy and fragmented, and so you're not going to get the benefits unless you've got that data straight anyway. So I think that's another thing to consider. I think where I've arrived is it sounds like a great answer, but I think for most businesses, it probably, at least a hybrid is probably more of a right answer than go and build your own completely naked LLM from the ground up. That's where I've arrived, Dan. I don't know what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. When I've been talking to different product people, and if I was running product teams again, or, running a business line again, I would really be saying and pushing to leverage the good core base models and then putting up the right guardrails with our data and giving it and building into that. So whether that's RAG, which a lot of companies are doing at the moment, or whether that's, really going in and owning these LLMs into becoming your own and taking that in. What you said is so true. A lot of people just don't know how to build the refinement, don't know how to do that. And if you're not capable of doing that, or you not feel comfortable in doing that, I would really consider how you would push forward with it, because I know how much even these startups that are building on top of these things, how much time and energy they've had, and they've actually had to hire AI researchers and really specific experts to really hit the ground on it. So I would be very mindful of what you can afford, how you can structure it, and how you can build out the right workflows, and then work out and stress test it against each other. Because even when you do build into it, what a lot of people are finding is that the answers aren't always so much better when you've added your own intelligence onto it, because of how it's been developed and coded. So just be very mindful of that. But as a business leader, I think if I was to make a bold prediction, the future would be these base models, and you're building out your own intelligence, your own layer on top to develop something you're proud of and you continuously own over time, versus that you continuously renting and having this battle against the output and people getting a 6 out of 10 answer, as opposed to when you roll your own version out, you get an 8.5 or a 9 out of 10.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, as we alluded to in a recent pod, and I think we're going to return to in the spring, is the way the big players are dealing, certainly for our enterprise customers listening to the pod, the way the big players are dealing with the enterprise is rapidly evolving at the moment. And so the tools that they're providing, the way that they're integrating AI is changing rapidly. So that's worth keeping an eye on as well, because you to your point, you could go and build your lovely LLM between now and the summer, and then it's outdated because some change in the way they all operate has meant that it's completely cleaned out. So keep an eye on that, and we will be returning to that in a future pod, the way that the major players are approaching the enterprise space in 2026.
Thanks for listening, everyone, today. We are going to add our notes down in the supporting newsletter, so you have that, so you can copy and paste and send to your colleagues if you need to. And Jonathan, thanks for today, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for listening today, everyone. If you liked what you heard, please give us a rating and review in any of the podcast players. We have a supporting newsletter, which is aimoment.co.uk, that comes out on Mondays and Fridays with every pod. and we dive a little bit deeper. So please subscribe there. Have a great week, and we'll see you soon.